Hello, Michael Tracy here, TUIT. We are in El Dorado Hills, California, where Congressman Tom McClintock, a Republican of California, is, oh my God, holding a town hall meeting. Wow, really impressive. Actually, I guess he does deserve some measure of credit because most Republicans are too scared to hold town hall meetings these days. But he's doing it. The crowd here seems overwhelmingly opposed to Trump, probably mostly non-Republicans, I'd wager. They seem fairly rowdy, at least for a Saturday morning. So we'll see what happens. A lot of people have expressed concerns to me about the supposed collusion between Trump and Russia. I'd even wager that that's the top issue being discussed right now at this meeting. So we will do some interviews and find out what's going on. Are you a resident of this district?
I am. I live right up the street. I live up by Calathea.
And do you think investigating the potential Russia connection should be a top priority for Democrats in Congress?
Well, I think it should be a top priority for both Democrats and Republicans. One concern I have is that the Congress, there are protections for the president to protect against a president who does unethical behavior or behavior that's not in the interest of the country. And that protection is the Congress. And if the Congress together, Republicans and Democrats, aren't willing to do their checks and balances and investigate material that's been uncovered or leaked, then yes, there is a problem.
Should investigating this alleged conspiracy, you think, be the top priority of Democrats at this point?
I think it should be the top priority of Congress at this point. Because if we have somebody who is in power that the Russians have dirt and control of, then we don't have an independent country. And too many people have died to try to keep it that way.
And are you a resident of this district?
I am a neighbor of this district. I live right on the cusp of his district. I live in Carmichael.
So you're not a resident of this district?
No, but I am an American, and I'm a Californian.
You have every right. You have every right to be here. But
yeah.
But there are people who say, "Oh, outside agitators are flooding into these things when they're not actual constituents."
Well, I am a member of this country. I'm a fourth-generation Californian. My family's been in California since 1849.
No, I think you have every right to be here. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know I do.
A lot of people here are concerned about Trump's potential ties to Russia. Is that something that bothers you?
No, because I don't see it as being a truism. I see it as fake news, and I feel that it's the job of our leaders to communicate with other countries to establish whatever trade or peace or whatever, and they would have to talk to the Russians or the Germans or the French, or it doesn't make any difference. Our legislators and cabinet would have to talk to these people to be able to keep peace in the world.
There are a lot of people here who seem to be upset about Russia and Trump's supposed ties to Russia. Is that something that bothers you?
Not at all.
Why?
Not one bit. You know, they're making a big stink right now about Jeff Sessions and him meeting. You know, perhaps he should have been a little bit more open or understood the question a little more about when they asked him when he met with the Russian ambassador. But the point is, every single congressman and senator meets with these guys.
And it's a little ironic because conservatives often accuse Obama of being too friendly or not being severe enough on Russia. Do you think there's an element of hypocrisy there on that side as well?
No, I don't know about that. I really don't. I wouldn't agree with that.
One of the top concerns we saw raised here today was Russia and Trump's purported ties to Russia, or if there might have been some kind of collusion. So you had a sign to that effect, charging Trump of treason.
Right.
Is that an issue that you think is a grassroots concern? Do people wake up in the morning worried about Russia generally?
Well, I think if Russia really did interfere in our free election, then that is a grave concern that all Americans should have, and that there's no reason that we shouldn't investigate with an independent prosecutor and special investigator to make sure that there was no impropriety. And if there wasn't, great. But it seems as if there's a lot to hide. The more people defend and deflect and redirect and pivot, the more you see that there may be something wrong. You know, we see smoke, we see smoke, we see smoke, we see smoke, and at some point you're going to find a fire.
Lately, especially in the last few weeks, we've been hearing more and more about members of the Trump administration who have been dealing with the Russians. They've been communicating with them. It's leading to great suspicion. We know that it's been very difficult for the House and the Senate to come to agreement to even start investigating. Will you call for a special prosecutor to make this investigation?
That I'd like you to help me with here. I've looked at the charges. I have a difficult time getting concerned about documents being officials in foreign governments. That's what they do. What is it in particular?
Before we get into Russia, I really want to talk about what's going on in our backyard. I want to hear about what politicians in California are doing so that way we can prevent another Oroville Dam failure in the future. I want to hear about that. Because the only reason why we can have these talks is we have to make sure that we're safe until we can have those talks. I can't worry about Russian connections if I'm worrying about my home being flooded with water.
I want to let you know that I'm wearing this shirt to show you that I am from Roseville, California. I am a constituent and not an anarchist. I'm wearing this because I was at the Roseville Town Hall where you accused us people of being anarchists, and I will not accept that. Communities that have unsafe drinking water. In the B today, they said there was 300 communities in California that have unsafe water, and now Trump has appointed Pruitt to be in charge of the EPA, and they're rolling back legislation regarding clean water. What are you going to do as a representative of all the people that take care of our water?
With respect to your first comment, I went out of my way in every interview that I did to say that the vast majority of people who came to Roseville came there out of sincere concerns over the future of our country. Unfortunately, a number of reporters simply decided not to report those comments.
Toward the end of your presentation, you characterized your constituents' concern about the Russian issue as hysteria.
Yeah.
What do you think is generating that hysteria? What is the cause of the hysterical reaction that we've seen?
Well, I think a lot of it is an inability of the Democratic Party to understand why they have lost major ground over the past 4 elections. If you recall, after this election, they were first blaming it on James Comey. Then they were blaming it on racist neo-Nazis. Then they were blaming it on media bias against Hillary Clinton. Ultimately, they ended up blaming it on Russian interference in our elections. Well, there was no interference in the elections. That was looked at very, very carefully. The integrity of the vote was maintained. What they did was to allegedly hack into the DNC's server and pull out embarrassing information. That's a big problem, but it didn't have an impact on the election. I think what had a far bigger impact on our nation's security was what they may have done with the classified information on Hillary Clinton's server that actually had less security on it than a Gmail account.
During the course of the Obama administration, Republicans frequently criticized Obama for being overly solicitous of the Russians or not being aggressive enough toward them. And now the Trump administration has taken on a similar tack, actually, where they are trying to seek some sort of cooperation. Is there any hypocrisy on the part of the Republicans?
Yeah, I think having good relations with all foreign countries is a good thing, not a bad thing. That's why governments talk to each other, and so I find it difficult to get hysterical about the fact that the Russian government talks to the American government. They do it all the time. There was an allegation, oh, well, they were having these conversations with campaign officials during the campaign. Well, a friend of mine years ago was a fellow named Bob Neeson. He was the American ambassador to Australia. And I remember him telling me during a major Australian election how they were constantly in contact with all of the candidates on issues of concern to the United States. One of their principal roles was to keep our government informed of the positions of the various candidates and to convey the concerns of our government to them. This is commonplace. So suddenly to frame this as some sort of international conspiracy, I think, is absurd.
So in retrospect,
I think it belies a problem that the Democrats are having right now. They're still trying to figure out why they lost the election. It had nothing to do with Russia hacking the DNC account. It had everything to do with their losing touch with Middle America.
So in retrospect, was the Republican criticism of Obama that he was overly friendly to Russia misplaced?
Like I said, I don't have a problem with governments seeking better relationships with each other, whether it's under Obama or Trump.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We have just wrapped up a town hall here in El Dorado Hills, California. Congressman Tom McClintock spent about 2 hours taking questions from often hostile constituents, so I would have to commend him for being uniquely accessible. Most of his Republican colleagues have chosen not to hold these town hall meetings, presumably because they don't want to be embarrassed by hostility directed at them from their constituents, but McClintock has done so, and he did so for an extended period of time, so kudos to him for that, I suppose. In terms of the issues that were raised, obviously there were an array of, I think, very legitimate issues raised having to do with immigration, healthcare, and so forth, but maybe the main theme was, once again, Russia and this issue of whether Trump has colluded improperly with the Russians, quote unquote. McClintock fielded a number of angry questions having to do with that, and you saw people chanting treason, people holding kind of provocative signage about Putin and so on and so forth. To me, that suggests a strain of paranoia running through these meetings. I had one organizer of the Indivisible movement suggest to me that questions were being planted. To me, that doesn't seem correct. I mean, this is a Republican district, so you would expect at least a couple Republican-oriented questions. So, notwithstanding the paranoid streak, I think it was a productive event. But the Russia issue is something I think people need to kind of tamp down a little bit and not get carried away with. Or at least that's my takeaway. Curious to know what you think.